Just 2 weeks ago, that ridge just beyond that pocket of clouds right there, all the way along that entire ridge, I could see flames shooting 500 feet in the sky. Today is such a blessing because the wind has blown some of the smoke out. You could actually see off in the horizon there the clouds over the ocean. But along that ridge, just on the other side, is complete and total burn area. It's just very, very sad. I'm very thankful that it is a clear morning here. Oftentimes in the afternoons, and the winds pick up a little bit, it stirs all this up. When I got home from work yesterday, I couldn't see any of this. It was just all smoke. It's all smoke. I'd like to talk today a little bit about the fires that have been going on in California, Oregon, and Washington. And I want to try to put a bit of a positive spin on it. It's really easy to talk about the doom and gloom and the horrific things that are going on, but let's put this into a different bit of a perspective. The forests, they burn. They often will burn. Matter of fact, what you're seeing out here, every one of these trees, every single one of these trees is less than 100 years old. I know that because back in the 30s, this whole area burned to the ground and it came back. Unfortunately, it came back with the tan oaks. And the tan oak is in trouble. It's dying from a disease called Phytophthora ramorum, sudden oak death. And in some areas, that's what's fueling a lot of these fires. So unfortunately, this forest too will either succumb to the decaying of the dead trees or possibly a fire. And that's a terrible thing to say because this is where I live. So many of these giant trees have died in just the last year. This problem started about 10 years ago. And if you look up, you can see another 100-foot plus tree that is totally dead. And if you look around the forest, there are dead trees everywhere. And I know I've talked about this many, many times, almost ad nauseum. Oh, here's a new one that just fell down. I just quit a Facebook group. It was a group of tree workers, and the reason that I quit was the comments started coming on there about the fires in California. And a lot of these people were saying very indignantly that it's the fault of the Forestry Service for not managing the forest. How do you possibly manage millions and millions of acres that looks like this? How do you deal with it? What do you rake the forest floor to keep it from burning? The problem is so widespread. It's dead and dying trees. It's drought. You can say climate change is causing all of this. I'm not going to get into that argument. I believe it because I notice that there are big changes. There's a lot of people out there that think that that's a hoax. Well, the reality of the situation is we're in deep problems right now. Big problems. I've been working all week long, and the smoke got so bad that I'm really feeling it in my throat right now. I'm out for a little bit of a walk on my property, but I'm not going to stay out very long. It's still smoky out here. On the positive side, I saw some stars last night, and that was actually a real blessing. Well, let's get on to the job that I wanted to talk about. This is actually the job that we did today. I've been working all week long at one of our complexes working on Bradford pears, a lot of fire blight, but this is kind of an interesting tree. This is a sunburst locust, and it's a beautiful tree. I mean, they have flowers all over them. They're really nice shade trees, but the client asked me to look at this tree, and I started digging into the base of it, and it was clearly hollow. So I talked to the client and I said, you might want to think about starting over. And they agreed. As soon as I showed them how hollow it was, they got a permit on it. And lo and behold, we got the job to remove this tree. So it wasn't really a tough job. With the bucket truck, it goes pretty smooth. But the wood is really, really hard and really heavy. I want to back up a little bit. This tree had been topped severely in the past, and lots of areas of the tree were breaking out. This is what perpetuated the call in the first place. A big piece broke out, and that caused the fear of the tree failing to, let's call an arborist. So I looked at the tree, and I spotted a lot of problems, and I'm up in the bucket right now doing the work, and the problems are even more glaring. They're really showing themselves as being really ugly. The tree is riddled with termites. I couldn't believe it. It was like almost every single cut was a termite colony throughout the whole tree. I had to ask myself, now, these termites, did they move in as a direct result of this tree being topped so severely in the past? And I think that's a strong possibility. All these wounds opened up and became decay pockets, and a lot of these insects are adventitious of areas of decay or areas of weakness in a tree. And they don't typically attack a tree, but they'll move into voids. And look at this. This blew my mind. That is all what's called frass. That's insect frass. That's from termites. It's insect poop. And the tree was just loaded with it. Every cut was like a discovery for me. So I spotted this one area where I just showed you, and I thought, I'm going to cut this open and see what it looks like on the inside. And I always find this sort of thing really interesting. The galleries, all of the areas where the insects live. And it's a community of termites that are in this entire tree. I did not see any carpenter ants in here. I didn't see any evidence of anything else, but the termites had completely and totally owned this tree. And it's interesting because typically you don't think about the termites being way up high. You think about them being, subterranean coming in from the base. And with that basal area as decayed as it was, did they come all the way up through the base and work their way up to the top? I don't think so. I think they landed in this tree when the termites went into the flying stage, and they colonized the tree from the top down. Now, I'm sure there's termites in the base as well, but I'll show you a little bit later on that as I worked my way down the tree, the termite colonies became less abundant, and the wood actually became more and more sound, which was kind of a surprise to me. So I decided to take one great big chunk here. I'm sorry if I don't have the camera as well situated as I wanted it to be. I put it up on my helmet and just went for it. Maybe I need to set it on the wider angle setting. And that's the limb I just plopped off onto the ground. One of the problems with this particular tree was that all of the limbs were interspersed. Because it was topped, they were growing through each other. All the branches were growing through each other. So it was a tangled up mess. I couldn't cut anything out of it without having to pull it out of the tree. So I'm spending a little bit of time just kind of checking it out, and it's more of it's almost like an experiment to see how far the termite damage goes. And I'm looking at it really closely as I'm doing the work. But I was taking one step at a time, one area at a time, clearing out all the stuff. I'm actually doing most of this work with a small bucket. We brought the big bucket in here, but we decided to situate it so that we could chip. Look at that. That's part of an insect home that completely hollowed it out. The termites created a big void, and that's quite a ways up in the tree. I was pretty surprised to see, how wide open this was. That's kind of cool. So I carried on doing the work and then finally got down on the ground, and I wanted to show you some of the wood that came out of this tree. This section was completely and totally decayed, and there was a hole there. I'm guessing there was a woodpecker that lived inside this tree or some other kind of bird, because there was a void there that we cut through, and you can see some of the nesting material in this section. This is the next piece of that one that I was just talking about. There wasn't any activity. There wasn't any bird activity in this tree, so this is an old nest. I didn't feel like a homewrecker here. But it's interesting. When you get into these trees, you often find that they're a habitat for a lot of wildlife. There was a squirrel's nest up in the top of the tree, but that was also vacant, so I broke that down. Like I said, originally the job was to cut this tree down, but once I got to a point where the wood became much more sound, look at that. There isn't any more decay. It got down to a point where all of the cuts were clean, and because this tree had been topped severely once before, I gave this woman the option. I said, you know what? If you don't want to have to plant a new tree here, and you don't want to pay the cost of getting this stump out of here and preparing this, or the cost of replacing this, we can give it a try. We can see if this will sprout out. And it did sprout out before abundantly. And I'm not an advocate of topping trees, but this is a tree that we were removing, and because it was a removal, this is like a last-ditch effort. So there it is. It's ugly. I almost feel like putting a sign up here saying, this was not my intent. This was a decision after the fact from a complete and total rotten tree. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that.